Hello, and welcome to the digital transformation in the fourth industrial revolution. I'm Brandon Jarina, and I'm a partner within IBM iX, where I help banks reimagine experiences, embrace change, and accelerate their digital transformations. To introduce this panel discussion, I'd like to share our point of view on how consumer banks are adapting to the next normal by accelerating their own digital transformations. First, I use the term next normal rather than new normal because significant disruptions are becoming a part of our business lives over the past 20 years. Whether it's economic crises, climate change, cyber attacks, and any other forces that really had us adapt and adjust our expectations, we think it's important to approach what comes after the current pandemic as the next normal in a pattern of ongoing global change. I've been discussing this impact of next normal in consumer banking with our clients for over a year, since the beginning of the pandemic, and one point has really become clear. Consumer behavior and expectations have changed, and that's driving an acceleration of the digital transformation that was already underway in our industry. That means branches that were the foundation of a brand identity and customer experience are now empty, sitting as shells of their former selves. By most accounts, foot traffic and transaction volume are down more than 60%. Nobody expects that to fully recover. Customers have been trained now to use digital and direct channels, whether it's using their Peloton at home, watching Netflix, or ordering their meals via DoorDash. There's a different expectation. And this shift in consumer behavior is really more important now for acquiring and serving customers. All of our banking clients are investing in digital channels to embrace self-service capabilities and to reduce contact center call volume. Also in the data and analytics to personalize omni-channel experiences at scale. And that includes the digital as well as over to the branch. So as you're thinking about this approach to branches, closing some, cross-training some staff, and shifting the focus towards advisory services, it's really expectation that we're going to see new branch designs with tablets, tablet-toting concierges to greet us, personalized touchscreen kiosks, and private meeting pods. At the same time, some of our clients have realized that if the customers don't return to the branch, a significant source of profitable revenue will go to other channels. Customers who used to walk in and ask for a loan without shopping around now approach the bank through its website or mobile app. And when that happens, it seems inevitable that more customers will shop around for price and better online experience. So now that the bank has to compete for the customer who used to be captive at the branch, fintechs who can do one thing and do it exceptionally well, product specialists, and digital natives, they all offer competitive deposits, payment, lending services, all with a sharper pricing and better customer experience. So while banks need to upgrade the branch customer experience, they also have to reinvent the sales and servicing platform. That includes the underlying customer value proposition. If they don't adapt it, it'll be too difficult to hold on to customers in the face of intensifying digital competition. And so, as we prepare to emerge from the pandemic into a possible economic boom, what can we expect from the next normal? Well, one thing's for certain, the next normal will require focus and rapid adaptation. One US bank CEO I spoke with recently shared that his top priority right now is preparing for market reentry. And while he must continue to serve clients, while he must really continue to serve clients under the pandemic restrictions and drive digital transformation. And that's hard to do, that sort of two-speed model. Judging from the huge volume of credit card applications that I see in my own house that are coming in the mail, US banks are expecting a wave of economic activity in the coming months. We may even have some long lines at branches. So, in closing, digital transformation is not about moving from expensive physical locations to more cost-effective digital channels, but it's really about leveraging the capabilities of digital to become more agile, focused, personalized, efficient, and also be effective in what the next normal will undoubtedly require in banking. Now, I'd like to introduce the moderator of our panel discussion on the fourth industrial revolution, Raheem Beyah, who's the Dean and Southern Company Chair in the College of Engineering at Georgia Tech. Thank you for joining us.
All right, so welcome to the Digital Transformation in the Fourth Revolution panel. I am Raheem Beyah. I am the Dean of Engineering at Georgia Tech, and I'm also a co-founder of an industrial security company called Fortified Logic. I am here with four outstanding panelists. I'm excited to be here with these colleagues to talk truly about Industry 4.0 and about this revolution that we're in the midst of. So I want to ask our panelists, maybe start with Bryce, if you can give us your background and anything else interesting you'd like to say as we get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I'm Bryce Gartner. I am the principal of the digital advisory group at Bekaert. I focus on our digital platform and analytics, working with companies all over the world, helping them take advantage of what they're trying to do around Industry 4.0, how they put analytics into play in that. I'm also an adjunct professor at the Fuqua School of Business at Duke University, where I teach data visualization and analytics, and ultimately have been around the space of analytics and data in two different capacities, really, as a chief marketing officer, as a chief information officer, and then put those two things together 12 years ago in a company that got acquired by Bekaert last February. So that's a little bit about me, and pass it back to you.
Perfect. Stephen.
Thank you so much, Raheem. My name is Stephen Ichaffa, and I'm responsible for deploying data center network infrastructure capacity for Google, and in ensuring the network capacity is delivered on time and in the locations that meet the customer needs. Additionally, I'm responsible for leading and executing diversity, equity, and inclusion, grassroots and programmatic efforts, basically ensuring that all Googlers feel a sense of belonging and can thrive to their fullest potential. I'm really excited to be here to talk about the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you, Raheem.
Thank you. All right, Wilson.
Thank you, Raheem. Hello, everyone. My name is Wilson Raj. I'm the Global Director of Customer Intelligence at SAS, which is the largest independent software vendor for business analytics. I'm particularly responsible for the global marketing of the customer experience or marketing analytics side of the business. So really helping brands make best use of their data to transform that data into intelligence. And I'm in the marketing space all the way through, and looking forward to the conversation with all of you, and hope to bring a sort of a CX or a customer experience perspective to some of the dialogues here. So great to be here.
Perfect. All right. Last but certainly not least, Vinay.
Thank you, Raheem. Great to be here. My name is Vinaya Srihari. I'm a field CTO at Snowflake. So what that means is I sit between the product and the field organizations. And so really two goals, being the voice of the customer with our internal product organization, making sure that our plans for the product and our vision for the product align with what our customers need. And on the field side, making sure that the technology actually brings value and is deployed and has the required benefit that our customers need. So sort of keep a leg in both those homes. And my background is I had a 16-year career at Oracle as a relational database, sort of a deep technologist there. And since then it's been smaller companies, startups, and we're always in the data space. So glad to be here.
Perfect. So I've read a number of definitions regarding the fourth revolution and Industry 4.0, and I know it means different things to different people. And I'll ask you all to, not necessarily in order that we just called, but I'd love to hear from everyone on the panel. What does this Industry 4.0, what does it mean to you? What in your space, from your perspective, how do you define it? Whoever wants to jump in. I'm trying not to be like I am normally in class, which is calling people and now the students actually turn the camera off, and I guess that's equivalent to sitting in the back of class. But anybody wants to jump in, feel free.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. Happy to do that, Raheem. I'm sure some of the others will have sort of more broader definitions. For me, the fourth industrial revolution, leading off of the third that we all recognize is the internet revolution and the microchip and the sort of the processing revolution. I think the fourth is really about bringing that to solving human problems, to solving and to thinking up new ways or new ideas, enabling new ways of collaborating. So data collaboration for me is the theme. And of course, it's what we do a lot of at Snowflake, what I do in my day-to-day job. It's about ways of taking the siloed data sets we all have, those valued pieces of information, the new oil, as it's called, data. The problem is that it still lives in its own silos, in its own cylinders, and getting people to share data has a lot of risks, and there's the trust factor. There's a lot of reasons why people don't like to share data. But I think in order to take technology to that next level where we can solve real human problems, both in the public and the private sector, we've got to figure out how to be able to collaborate with data, and that's where I think technology really has to help, and rather than hinder, as it does sometimes do. So there's a lot to unpack there, I think, with this fourth revolution. But I think we're all agreed that we're just getting started on this. So I think it's going to be a fun ride.
Perfect.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's definitely a continuation of the story, right? And I think in our title of the panel session has got two gigantic, I would say, buzzwords, right? There's digital transformation, which is in and of itself, entire. I mean, you ask 100 people, you'll get 100 definitions, which are probably correct, right? Same thing with 4IR. So I think if you put the two together, you get this double whammy. But the way I would think about it is that they are connected. Digital transformation is fueled by data, as Vinny talked about, to really achieve three broad things, right? One is just completely change the way organizations are dealing with their constituents, whether it's a customer or a citizen or a patient, right? So customer experience is one element, and data fuels that. The other one is some kind of operational excellence, efficiencies, new ways of executing, new ways of measuring, and so on. And the last one is a combination of the two, which is really new business models. And we're seeing a lot of that with digital transformation. Now, digital transformation to me is a subset of the fourth industrial revolution, because that's where everything comes together. It's the fourth IR is the ecosystem where there's a huge impact technologically, sociologically, financially on not just consumers, but people, society, the way we live, the way we work, the way we interact, the way we do commerce, the way we do recreation. And everything is accelerated, more immersive. And obviously there's some defining technologies in both. And I think that they share some similarities, but things such as automation, right? AI, immersive tech that we see all over the place. We talked about now the blockchain, right? For trust and privacy or accountability is another one. IoT is big, sensors, drones. So those all technology elements of both, and particularly fourth IR. And I think the question to Vinay is, so what do we do now? How does that change us as consumers of fourth IR, but then as organizations delivering that, how do we think about it and exercise that with balance and some foresight?
Yeah, I think Wilson and Vinay, you're absolutely right? So at the application level, at the application layer, and looking at the data that needs to be consumed in order to provide these sorts of benefits, underlying all of that is the network infrastructure, right? So at Google, we're trying to push Google Cloud, and thinking about the fourth industrial revolution is, how can we get to every single customer access to a supercomputer? Because all those things that you just talked about have to be done, have to be processed in a supercomputer. So it's about moving the network infrastructure closer and closer to the edge, so we can get it closer and closer to the customer, to the consumer, to the government agencies. I think the fourth industrial revolution may bring a situation where you start seeing data centers, not only closer to the edge, but think about, let's say, a McDonald's or a Starbucks, and replace that with a data center. I mean, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but that's the kind of revolution we need to drive all this digital transformation that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I of course agree with all of you, because you are all a really smart group of people. The way that I try and simplify it down when we start to talk about this is, it is so data centric and it is so technology centric when we think about the fourth industrial revolution. But I think about it as, in the different elements of the other revolutions where we added different types of power, we added different types of automation with robotics and things that we added in the third. When I think about the fourth, what we're trying to do in those previous revolutions, we were doing things to improve the human condition of what was happening in industry and their interaction with industry and their production. And so when I think about it, I think about how data and the technology that's enabled today really helps us add the component. This time around isn't about a different power source or a capability. It's about adding intelligence to the situation that augments the capabilities of the people who are having to act in those situations, whether it's in the context of somebody who's manufacturing something and improving the efficiencies and the capabilities and the consistency and the resiliency of the supply chain, or when it's in that customer experience and what happens at Netflix, for example, when we get a recommended pathway of what we might enjoy watching. We're trying to leverage intelligence in the fourth industrial revolution to have a positive impact on the people that have to interact with that technology to deliver what industry is trying to do.
That's great.
I love what you said there, Bryce. Because I think what Stephen, with the whole data center stuff and Vinay, right? Maybe we should just rename this the fourth intelligence revolution, because that's what it is. It's bring the data centers, bring the infrastructure. And then, of course, data isn't anything without the analytics, right? To be able to uncover those insights. But then that's not enough either. And there needs to be human interpretation and judgment. We can definitely have a nice conversation on whether, it's all AI or human, or is it both, right? And, we can have a debate on that. But I think it's really the intelligence takes front and center in terms of how we're going to solve a lot of these problems, right? Both in the moment and also at scale.
No, that's great. And I was actually going to go exactly there, Wilson, which is, and kind of on following up with what Stephen said, which is, hey, this infrastructure and networks, and then we also talked about sensors, and so I have, let's say, the technical capability, and I get all this data. I'm a company, but and you just touched on it. But what's next, right? I spent all the money. I got data. I got sensors all over everywhere. I have infrastructure. I've converted my Starbucks. Well, no, I'll keep my Starbucks. I converted McDonald's to a data center. What do I do with all this data? And I'd love to know if you've seen, not specific companies, but maybe types of organizations that's kind of managed this revolution better than others.
Well, I'm going to take that one first if I can, group. I mean, first you drop it all into Snowflake, so we keep Vinaya happy on everything.
Commercial. There we go.
Right. But from there, really, I think it's really going to shift. And I was sitting down not too long ago with the head of the chief data officer at Ford Motor Company, and I thought they really talked about a shift that they were making in shifting knowledge capabilities and intelligence capabilities to the people who were making decisions, and how they even approached that, right? They recognized that they had people who had vast amounts of knowledge that needed to get involved in the structure of the machine learning systems because they had the knowledge of what actually was happening on the ground. But then they were also the ones, to Wilson, to your point, that by integrating some of that so it got more consistent in delivery and made some of the decisions, but it made them to a point that supported the people, the knowledge workers on the floor whose jobs shifted. They didn't go away, but they shifted to making higher level decisions, to decisions that had more of an impact on the business, that gave them the capability to get out of some of the rote work and into more of the decision making and into things that could have a significant impact on how their employee experience was, and then ultimately how that ultimately delivered out to the customer. And I felt like that is a way that, as we think about this, as you replace it, it's going to cause a dramatic shift in how people approach the work that they do. I'm not necessarily a believer in it's going to replace all of this work, but it's going to elevate the work. As we phase through adding these intelligent components to all phases of business, and we put people closer in touch with that data in a way that they can ask smarter questions of it, because some of the rote stuff is already done.
Yeah, there's an example that I wanted to share here on sort of early on in the pandemic. I think it was in the April timeframe. There was a theory floating around that with higher temperatures and higher humidity, the virus would disappear. And it's like so that was the great hope, right? June, July, hot weather, like the flu, it just magically disappears. And all of the tropical countries. I come from India, so everyone was like, okay, we're going to be seeing this first because our summer actually starts a little earlier, and so this dip is going to start. So one of our customers in the public sector, a research institution, wanted to actually have the data to try and figure out if these trends were in fact happening. So there was an amazing partnership between Weather Source, which has which tracks humidity and weather on a minute by minute basis across the world, and a group out of Eastern Europe, a company called Star Schema, that was in the process of aggregating information from every world government, the WHO, Johns Hopkins, New York Times, all of the in-country sources, reliable sources of hospitalization, of infection, put that all together into a set of tables and views, and update it on a hourly basis, or as soon as they had reliable information. And then there was sort of a consortium formed, and very quickly, with some really cool analytics tools, they could show that in fact there was no difference whether you were in a Arctic latitude or an equatorial latitude in terms of how your cases were trending. And that sort of, from a data perspective, started putting an end to that theory, although people still kept sort of talking about it. But at least it was an example of data for to sort of having all that data at your fingertips, which would otherwise take you a really long time to even get to, and then upload to a system and then share with everybody. Being able to do that, I thought that was incredible. That all happened in a matter of weeks. So,
right.
And I think
of IR 4.0 right there. Yeah.
And I think, Vinay, you touched on something really key, right? So decisions have to be made, predictability, proactive measurement of things so that you can respond. And I think that's where the fourth IR comes with accelerators. So we talked about data centers being in every location, talked about access to a supercomputer, but now we have supercomputers that have accelerators, the tensor processing units that Google developed, for example, where you have custom hardware for machine learning and research. This is what really unlocks the potential of fourth industrial revolution, to speed things up so that as we respond to pandemics like what we've been through the last year, these TPUs can process that information and spit out predictions. And I think that's where the power of the fourth industrial revolution will be harnessed, is the improvements in technology, the development of these units, processor units, the bringing together of this data in these processing units to unlock the potential because of the technology we've been able to unlock through TPUs. I think that's going to be key.
Right. I completely agree. And I tell you, I hate to be Raheem Downer. I guess that doesn't go that well, but as a security person, I tell you, I'm excited about all the things that we can do, and that this the fourth IR is going to bring. But I'm also paranoid about the data integrity, paranoid about the AI algorithm and things like bias, right, that we know that exist in the AI, and just the privacy of individuals. So I on one hand, I hear about all this promise, and I love the story that you just told, Vinaya. It's like, this is, and it's very actionable. This is what we can relate to right here in the midst of this pandemic. But I couldn't help but think, wow, what if somebody, mucked with that data, and it was very different. So I love to get, I know I throw out a lot, but love to hear your responses to privacy and bias and integrity of data and all this as we start to trust these systems so much more. Yeah.
Hey, Raheem, I think your response, maybe I suspect most, maybe all of us on the panel, we have that, it's a tension between, as a consumer, right? The personalization that we crave and we want, but then also the privacy concerns. And actually right before the pandemic hit, so this was late 2019, we had done global research on the future of customer experience. So I'm coming from a consumer experience perspective as it relates to digital transformation. And it was 6,000, worldwide, about 3,000 marketers and 3,000 consumers. And one of the big themes, one of the couple of themes that came up, but one of them was this whole notion of digital trust. And 73% of the consumers worldwide said that they are absolutely afraid of the kinds of data that's being captured. So it doesn't matter if you're in Asia or North America or LATAM, that's kind of universal. And then, about 83% said that they would absolutely lose trust at the first instant there's some kind of a breach. So, I think this notion of, you're right, they have, to Stephen's point, we have all these processing units, huge chunks of data, which actually gives you that intelligence. But then part of the, I guess a mandate is also to figure out, how do we govern, how do we steward, maybe there's a better word, right? Not just secure, but there was stewardship responsibility for any organization, taking advantage of these automated technologies and to be able to protect that trust. So it's a balance, and then how you communicate that back to users, right? Hey, Raheem, this is what we're collecting, things about you. Here's a site where you can go audit. I see some brands doing that, not a whole lot, very few, where they're actually giving like a monthly statement of the data capture that you have. These are some very progressive companies in Europe and so on, because they have GDPR. Yeah. And you just look at it and say, yep, that's good. No, I don't want that. Imagine that, giving the power back to the consumer. So I think that's one of the elements.
How do you do it though, in a way? I always think about, I always challenge my students and even my folks at my company, how do I build a system that my mid-70s mother will use? I mean, I would be annoyed with, I would be thankful that, I can go and look at my data, it's successful, I can decide to delete it. I could probably figure out how to do it. I would imagine most folks wouldn't. or wouldn't be interested. So I like that idea, but I would think that we need to figure out how do we even make that, putting privacy back in our hands, how do you make that accessible, right? How do you make the average person even understand what that means?
I think that's a lot to put on the consumers, right? We're in this space, so I can tell you, I have 100 passwords to 100 different sites because they have 100 different requirements. There's no way I can keep track of all of those, right? So I don't have an easy answer to that one, but I do believe that companies cannot absolve themselves of that responsibility. You talked about ethical AI. It has to be a core part of what a business does. As they build a product, as they allow consumers access to all this information, as they collect information from customers, part of that information collection or information provisioning has to have in it a core value of these are the ethical standards by which we're going to uphold ourselves, and there has to be a way to govern those standards. So it's a tough question because generationally you have some folks who are okay with it, save the password on the browser and I don't want to know what the password is. Then you have others who want to maintain a running log of the passwords. There's too wide a net to cast to catch all of those.
I agree, Stephen, completely. I mean, I think the SaaS companies, that's the AA SaaS companies like Google, like Snowflake, like Salesforce. We have these controls, right? I mean, because we're managing other people's data all the time, so we're audited, we're always tracked. We've got certifications to prove that nobody can actually look at the data. So I mean, this is what we live and breathe. But I think in some sense, every company is a steward of data today, right? Because I mean, even if you're not a quote unquote SaaS company, you're not a managed service provider. You provide a piece of software that somebody installs in their own data center, maybe in that converted McDonald's. But regardless, I mean, you're still managing data, and to that extent, you need to have the same level of controls with your employees. Whether they are whether it's accidental or whether it's sort of malevolent, or it's an inside actor or an outside actor. That needs to be the standard for any company now, because you have customer data. So you've got to have that same level of control. So I think the SaaS companies perhaps have a role here to play to kind of make public what they have done, public in the sense of the processes that they follow, not the exact security steps that they use, but the processes that they follow, so that this can become, as you say, don't put it on the consumer. As a technology company, you have to do it. But I think the other side of the challenge is you can't hinder innovation. So you have to do this in a way that you can still bring out that new product, that new feature, that new capability that provides value. You can't hold that back with the fear of security. So it's striking that balance, and finding those solutions that can allow you to do both. I think what Apple did with pulling out third-party cookies from iOS devices was a bold move. It was a tremendous move. I think it was done despite all the pressure from all of their most popular apps, Facebook and so on. I mean, all of the different apps that run on your Apple devices now. There's no more third-party cookies. I think that's the kind of leadership, and I think the move you need to see across the board.
Right. Yeah, and to your point, that puts the onus back on that stewardship, right? At SaaS, this is the 1A. I think that that governance goes also to the algorithms, the model governance. So absolutely, because and I think Stephen, I mean, you're right in there, and same thing with Bryce, right? From an analytics perspective, those models degrade. Something that's relevant now, a week later is out of whack because conditions change. But yet, from some of our customers, they're using the same segmentation models basically like every year. It's crazy. I mean, these are big retailers. So in fact, what we try to do is at the algorithm level, right? The analytics, the AI, the machine learning, there's also transparency and governance in terms of, are these models still valid? Is it giving the desired result? What's going wrong? And then exposing any kind of anomalies to the data scientists to say, all right, I need to check on this stuff to make sure that I'm getting the right kinds of results. So I think you're right that digital stewardship or guardianship has to extend all the way through, right? Even if you're not just doing cloud services, but every aspect of that business.
Yeah, I just like to echo that, and not, Raheem, not to be on your side and be the negative guy, but that one of the challenges, and it is incumbent on all of us to understand the ethical components, just the governance components of what we're thinking about, because at the same time, I think the other part of industry 4.0, if you will, is there's a sprint. Everybody is sprinting to do the next best thing faster and faster and faster. And a lot of times what gets missed in that is the governance component, right? We're on to the next 12 things, and the governance part of that, and having the processes in place and the models and the discipline to do exactly what you described, Wilson, of having the governance over the models, having the governance over the data, and making sure that goes there is tremendous. It requires a tremendous amount of discipline from the organizations, because there is this how fast can we get somewhere mentality right now around AI and machine learning and all the data components. I think the other piece of this that I wanted to add goes back, Raheem, to where you started with this is, the other part of this equation is you now have cybersecurity, all the big companies were all part of larger organizations, all have to deal with that, right? And they have a lot of people who are dealing with that. But as we all know, a lot of innovation starts at smaller companies. And when you think about smaller companies and the level to which they're having to try and play in that space, is trying to figure out how we help them understand that. One of a client that we were working with, not in the cybersecurity space, but in the analytics space, they were talking about, and this is a small, $25 million company, which isn't even the smallest companies, right? But $25 million company, talking about the number of attacks that they had identified because they had put a big emphasis on cybersecurity, just the number of breaches that they had thwarted in their structure. And you think about that, and you think about the resources that they have and don't have, and how important and how much more important that's going to be as we continue to evolve these components.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I want to stick with you for a moment and switch gears just briefly to, you touched on this earlier, but I think we should go back to it. It was workforce. And, everybody's been promising me a 4-hour work week for the last 40, 50 years. And for some reason, they missed a couple of zeros, at least one. So what are your thoughts? I mean, we have lots of automation that really is coming, and it's coming quickly, as you said, with the sprint, and they're accelerating. How is this going to affect the workforce, the folks that are out there that the PLC is going to replace?
I'll go first, but it's not going. I'm not a believer we're ever going to get to the 4-hour work week. We might get to the point. In my mind, I think one of the things that's happened, and I read somewhere, can't remember where it was quoted, so I won't misquote it, but they're talking about that, how the pandemic accelerated a lot of the technology in this being forced into this work from anywhere scenario, how that advances some of the other things that we weren't even thinking about relative to, like, that weren't top priorities relative to 4.0. But in my mind, I think where we'll see a shift is we will be able to add some of that intelligence to the level to where we will not be as bound to location or being in person or on premise, or even in manufacturing to some degree, where we'll be able to get ourselves a step removed from that, which has pros and cons, right? As we've all seen through the pandemic, it's like, hey, I'm going to get to spend a year and 3 months at home. Doesn't that sound like a good idea a year ago? Well, now it sounds like a very different proposition. And kind of in my mind, because what we've seen in talking to clients as we've helped them through that is really the line has gotten even further blurred on when work ends and when work when it begins and ends, because now I can do it from anywhere, anytime, any possibility. And so I see us as adding intelligence to help us be better in decisioning, being more efficient, but in this, at the same time, we have those demands I just talked about that are concerns of trying to get further faster, which keeps that period of time we're working at about the same. So.
Mhm.
So it's really interesting, Raheem. I want to tell a short story. This is not the first time we've seen something like this, right? So in the book, Tools and Weapons, The Promise and Peril of the Digital Age by Brad Smith and Caroline Brown, there's an interesting chapter about the day the horse lost its job. And basically they reference that once upon a time, you had volunteer teams of men and boys pulling fire engines. And then in the mid 1800s, primarily due to an epidemic, that became the job of a horse, right? So the horses were pulling fire hoses for a long time. And then technology drove the horses to be replaced by automobiles, right? So here's something interesting that happens. On one hand, you had farmers who depended on growing food for horses losing out on their livelihood. But on the other end of the spectrum, you had supply stores now selling tires and batteries. You had automobile assembly lines. You had repair shops, parking garages, a lot of direct outcomes of this revolution.
Mhm.
But then there was also indirect outcomes, consumer credit, financial capital institutions, ad agencies, marketing agencies. So I think as we look at the fourth industrial revolution, I don't know that we'll get to the 4-hour week. And I'm fearful of the impact that it will have on consumers and companies and communities. But I do know one thing, I'm optimistic that we are really resilient and we're innovative enough to create new industries and jobs that we haven't even thought of. So I think it's going to be an interesting ride. Let's just say that.
No, that's right. That's right. Well, good. I do want to come to a close, but I'm gonna ask each panelist. I'm gonna make it tricky, just to be difficult. We talked about people, which is great, but I also want to, even if you can just touch on it briefly, if you care to, in like a closing brief statement, each panelist. What about organizations? I'd love to understand how organizations need to transform. So any kind of closing thoughts around that, I think would be really great, or anything else as we get started. And I'll see if I can go to Bryce, and maybe we will end in that same order, if that's all right. I'll ask Bryce if he can jump in and give a closing words of wisdom, and feel free to address my topic or not. This is why I love working with experts, because experts do whatever the heck they want to do. So it's totally up to you.
No, I think that's a good way to look at it. I think organizations are really going to have to prioritize. I think as they look at where they can add intelligence into their systems, whether they're in manufacturing, whether they're in marketing, whether they're in healthcare, they're going to have to prioritize where that goes, where it can have the most impact on their people, and where the technology supports what they're wanting to do. And that intelligence, they're going to have opportunities everywhere, but where it can make the most impact and where they ask those critical questions about what the impact they're looking to do, is going to come down a lot to what those businesses represent. Do they have certain vision? Do they have certain missions that they're trying to accomplish beyond the profit motive? Beyond those things, how that plays in is going to drive some of those intelligent decisions that they're trying to make.
Perfect. And Stephen.
I would say embrace the change. It's coming, so don't be fearful of it. Embrace it. But I would also point out, be very intentional in bringing your employees along with you, whatever that means. If it's training, such that there's no isn't that big of a gap between where your company is heading technology-wise versus the capabilities of your employees because you've left them behind.
Love it. All right, Wilson.
I believe that the organization is just like the individual. And Stephen talked about the impact on the workforce or the individual. We'll have to reimagine the future, and I say that in a way that means reimagine the operating model, both from an organizational perspective and from an individual perspective. And I do believe, not just because I'm a marketer, that this notion of empathy and emotion is going to be even more important in 4IR, simply because of what we've seen in the pandemic. A lot of innovation happened simply because we want to be able to make things easier, valuable, helpful, which is exactly what, fourth IR, I think we said in the beginning, is all about. So using AI to really offload all those cumbersome tasks, like, if it's markets pricing and aggregation of data and price optimization, all those kinds of things, but then leaving the human being to say, how do I connect with at an individual level, both internally, but also with my customers, and provide value and help along the way. So that's my thing.
All right, and Vinay.
I think what we noticed during the course of the pandemic at Snowflake, we had launched our Snowflake data marketplace right around January, February timeframe. And this was all about having a place, the idea was to have a place to exchange data, kind of, your app store for data was the idea. Started off with maybe five or six. We've got over 300 major providers now. And so what we noticed was that consumers kind of rule, really. I mean, when they demand that it's easier for them to move between technologies, companies get in line. I recently heard that two of the largest online music subscription services are now sharing data on artists, so that when consumers move between the services, they get the same artist profile, the same concert schedule, mostly online, but hopefully in person soon. So this is competitors who are sharing data in order to make the consumer experience a lot easier. And I was reading a World Economic Forum report where the term fourth industrial revolution was coined, on how business to business sharing has gone up from about 5% to almost 20% in the last 3 years between competitors. So they actually looked at two leading competitors within a space doing almost no sharing, but now getting to the point where they're sharing almost 20% of their data for the good of the consumer. And I think that's where, sure, I mean, trust, I'm completely with you, Raheem, on the importance of trust and security. But I think if we have this goal in mind, and we know what the anti-patterns are, we can use this great technology we have for that goal.
No, well said. And I tell you, my wish, if you will, is that we really are thoughtful about building security in and not necessarily have a repeat of the internet, right? Where it was just this amazing innovation that has changed the world forever. And yet we got to go back and bolt on SSHs and encryption and all these other things that we never thought about. And so I think we do have the opportunity. So when I think of machine learning, I think of adversarial machine learning with everything, and not just solely trusting data. So my wish and hope to all the folks who are out there in the fourth hour space going through this is that they actually think about security every step of the way. So good. Well, this is exciting. I learned a lot again, hanging out with you gentlemen. I really appreciate your time, and I hope that the viewers out there have had a great time and enjoy the rest of your sessions.